Inflation recently rose to 9% in the UK, which is the highest level seen in 40 years. Prices in the UK are expected to rise 13.1% over this year and the next, the most in any of the G7 countries. And according to the International Monetary Fund, the UK will drop to the bottom of the group for growth in 2023. With economic growth weaker than expected, the Bank of England expects we will be in a recession by 2023. And many people are saying we may be about to enter a period of stagflation. Wow, that's probably one of the most depressing intros I've ever done to a video. So in this video, I'm going to explain what stagflation is, why stagflation is bad, what causes stagflation, what are the effects of stagflation, is stagflation worse than a recession, and is the UK heading for stagflation? If it's your first time watching my channel, then my name's Ollie, and right now I'm suffering with really bad hay fever. So I apologise if I look like I've got a pink eye in this eye here. But anyway, on this channel we discuss all things related to personal finance and investing, so please don't forget to subscribe, and if you get any value from this video, then I'd really appreciate an early thumbs up, as it helps the channel massively to reach more people. Now, before we get stuck in, I must be clear, I am not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video is intended to be financial advice, and if you want financial advice, you should seek a licensed professional. At the end of the day, I am just a guy on YouTube, so you should always do your own research, because this video is just for entertainment purposes only, and past performance is not indicative of any future results. So now that's out of the way, let's get stuck into the video. So firstly, I'm going to briefly explain a bit about the relationship between inflation levels and interest rates. So currently in the UK, at the time of recording, the Consumer Prices Index, or CPI, which is the main way they measure inflation, is at 9% in the 12 months to April. And the older Retail Prices Index, which includes mortgage interest payments, is at 11%. The rise in inflation is being driven by rising energy and fuel prices, which has been exacerbated by the invasion of Ukraine. And in addition to this, we are suffering from supply chain constraints which are affecting the cost of raw materials and food prices. Inflation is now at its highest level since March of 1982, and the Bank of England forecasts inflation to peak at over 10.25% in Q4 of this year. So to combat inflation, the Bank of England has raised the base interest rate, which at the time of recording is at 1%. Which is the highest it's been in 13 years, and more increases are expected in 2022. The idea behind this is that if it's more expensive to borrow money, then people will spend less, and if interest rates rise, then people will potentially put more money in a savings account. This in turn would create less demand for goods and services, which should hopefully bring down prices and stop inflation from rising so quickly. In contrast to this, between March of 2020 and December 2021, when the pandemic hit, the base rate had been at a record low of 0.1%, with the aim to encourage people to spend rather than save and get the economy moving. This also allowed businesses to borrow money cheaply so they could survive through the pandemic. To make the situation worse, wages are currently falling behind inflation, and companies are struggling with labour shortages caused by the pandemic and Brexit, and the workforce size has shrunk, with many people choosing not to return to work. As businesses struggle to recruit staff, this can also cause prices to rise as supply fails to keep up with the demand. So what is stagflation? According to Investopedia, stagflation is characterised by slow economic growth and relatively high unemployment, or economic stagnation, which is at the same time accompanied by rising prices. Stagflation can be alternatively defined as a period of inflation combined with a decline in the gross domestic product, or GDP. Stagflation seems counterintuitive to classic economic theory. Normally when unemployment is high, then consumers have less income and therefore spend less, and in turn prices typically drop when spending drops. Unemployment and inflation tend to be inversely correlated, but stagflation is an exception to this rule. So what causes stagflation? The two root causes of stagflation economists generally agree upon are supply shocks and fiscal and monetary policies. A supply shock is anything that reduces the economy's capacity to produce goods and services at given prices. For example, recently we have seen supply shocks in labour, with fewer people working since the pandemic. We have also seen a supply shock in goods such as oil, gas, and other raw materials like wheat and fertilizer due to the invasion of Ukraine, and also due to lockdowns in China causing supply chain constraints. One notable period of stagflation occurred in 1973, where members of the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries announced there would be an oil embargo for any country supporting Israel in the Yom Kippur War. This meant that countries like the US and UK were no longer able to import oil from the Middle East, and this caused oil prices to soar by 300%. The embargo was lifted in March 1974, but the effects rippled throughout the 1970s. In the UK, inflation went from 9.2% in September 1973 to 12.9% in March 1974. And unemployment also climbed sharply. Before the 1970s, it was assumed that periods of high inflation were not a problem, and it was thought that a growing economy meant businesses would just hire more staff to expand, therefore creating more supply, which would fulfill higher demands for goods and services and in turn curb rising prices. But stagflation in the 1970s caused central banks to set a target for inflation, and most economies now generally target around 2% per year. This target allows businesses to set the correct prices and also lets households plan their spending better. So what are the effects of stagflation? Well, slow growth, high unemployment and high inflation put significant pressure on an economy. Low GDP growth means less job security, because in a weak economy, people are more likely to be laid off. If you are lucky enough to keep your job, then you are likely to receive low wage growth. Companies are also affected because their costs increase, and as people are less likely to afford price increases, then some companies may take a cut in margins, so their growth may potentially slow down also. As investors, there's the possibility that corporate earnings growth will also slow down. Because the average prices for food, fuel, medicines and services are higher, it makes it more difficult for families to cut back on spending, which means households will also have less disposable income. Stagflation can leave some unable to pay their rent or keep up with their mortgage payments, leading to rising defaults. In addition, inflation will often outstrip wage growth, so basically purchasing power falls. So stagflation is really not a great scenario to be in, and it can create a situation where things quickly spiral out of control. Stagflation is not easy to solve, as central banks have to reduce the money supply without hurting families too much, and while keeping inflation low. At the same time, they need to encourage businesses to hire more staff to keep unemployment down. So is stagflation worse than a recession? Well, a recession is 2 quarters of sustained negative economic growth or negative GDP. Stagflation is considered to be worse than a recession because it combines the worst outcomes of a recession, but in addition comes with higher prices for necessary goods. It leads to fewer jobs and lower wages, meaning less money for families to spend. So is the UK economy heading for stagflation? Well, unfortunately, the signs point to it being a realistic possibility. So, as predicted by the Bank of England, a recession is likely going to happen by 2023, and as prices are increasing, the UK economy is not keeping up. Real household disposable income per person is set to fall by 2.2% in 2022 to 2023, the largest single year fall since records began in 1956. In regards to inflation, Brexit and COVID have contributed to shortages of workers. There is a lack of lorry drivers and agricultural workers, which are both needed to produce goods and get them in the shops. Unemployment is currently low in the UK, but the workforce has shrunk from what it was pre-COVID by 440,000. as many people have chosen to not return to work. Almost half the decline can be accounted for by a drop in EU workers. This stands in contrast to most other big rich economies where the labour force has recovered more and adds to the Bank of England's inflation worries. For the first time ever in the UK, there are more job vacancies than there are unemployed people. The central bank fears a tight labour market will limit the economy's growth potential and put fresh upward pressure on wages as businesses need to pay higher wages to get skilled staff, which in turn pushes up prices, making it harder to bring inflation back to its target. Plus, the global supply chain issues with the likes of the global chip shortage, China locking down recently due to COVID, and the invasion of Ukraine has pushed up oil prices and is making it harder to source goods and raw materials, and is causing further price increases, which is spurring on the cost of living crisis. So unfortunately, it's not a great outlook, but we'll just have to wait and see. So let us know below, do you think we are heading for stagflation in the UK? If you do, let us know in the comments and give us your reasons why. Or if you don't think we are, let us know in the comments below also. I'd love to know, and I read all your comments. Also, if you've got any questions on this video, then please leave them below. If you enjoyed this video or got any value from it, then please smash the like button, as it really helps the channel massively. Also, if you want to learn more about personal finance or investing, I have loads of videos on my channel, so I recommend you check them out. So please don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon so you don't miss out on any future updates, as I upload new videos every week. It's been Ollie from Get Geek Finance. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.